said he went to a class. He paid a lot of money to go to a beekeeping class, and he didn't. Said he didn't learn anything because the guy wouldn't let him ask questions. He just talked about what he wanted to talk about. So Karen is my wife, and she's a little nervous that I haven't prepared anything.
Because I'm type A.
But we can go any direction that y'all want to go. I'm going to talk about how I got started. And I know Jan wanted to talk about the swarm traps, which is what I've put up out here. The other swarm trap, I put up 2, and the other one has bees in it right now. It's out there, and it's got bees coming and going. Me and Jim was just out there watching it. So they've already moved into that one, too. So we'll talk about that a little bit.
Maybe they want like to go see that when we're finished.
Yeah.
When we go
Yeah,
over to the garden.
just, it's an active hive, so just be careful and don't get too close. Because there's 2 reasons a bee will sting. There's only 2 reasons that a honeybee will sting you. And one is if you get too close to their home, they will protect their home. And the other is if you pinch it. So if you pinch it in your arm or put your hand on it, it'll sting you. But other than that, if it's just out visiting flowers, they don't sting. If they're swarming, they don't normally sting. But if you're in their home or get too close to their home, which that's their home right now, until I move them, so they will sting if you get too close. But you can get close enough to see them, and I don't think they'll bother you. We were driving. I've been keeping bees for a while, and I've gotten older. Jan says she knows me as a little boy, but Heather's here too. She's our cousin. I think first cousin once removed. Our cousin's daughter. I think that's what it is. But I remember her sitting on a table with a little baby too. I see her the way Jan sees me. I don't know. It's weird, but I'm a little older than Karen, and her son. We had him out last night, my stepson, and she said, "What are you gonna?" She said, "You know, we got to go to Jan's tomorrow night." And I said, "Oh, I forgot." It kind of snuck up on me, and she's like, "Oh, what are you gonna say? What are you gonna talk about?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get there." And she kept asking me, and finally Ben spoke up. He's 12, and he said he teased me about being old, and he said he's going to talk about how he rode his dinosaur to the bee yard, checked on the bees, on the dinosaur, and then when he gets done, he might explain how the pyramids were built. So he thinks it's funny teasing me about my age. He hadn't been around Jim much.
I heard my name already.
I got started in bees in 1999. My dad and I actually started together. We started with boxes. I had wanted to get started in bees for a long time, and I didn't have anybody to show me. I've had cows, and I've had sheep and goats, and I can pretty much read a book on how to raise those and be okay. But bees is not something that you can do that with. You have to have somebody to show you. But we got started in 1999 with boxes from Jan's brother Reed. He got out of beekeeping and gave all his stuff to my dad. And then he had a guy at church, Bernie, that give him some bees, some sticks off of his hive. So he got bees from Bernie and boxes from Reed, and we started. He shared those with me, and we both started together keeping bees. At the time, we didn't have all the internet stuff that we have now, but there was a lot of books. I got all the books that I could read, and I found out pretty quick that you can split hives. The way they reproduce is to swarm, but you can stop that, and you can split those hives before they swarm, and if you've got one hive, you can make it into 2, and if you've got 2, you can make it into 4, and if you got 4, you can make it into 8, and so on. So I was seeing dollar signs, and they would make honey. The average honey production in Kentucky is 60 pounds of honey per hive, and that's a 5-gallon bucket of honey, and that's the average. And honey sells for a lot of money. So I was looking at that and thinking, I can make this work. But in the springtime, bees will make you look really good. And in this time of year, when they're swarming, they're collecting nectar and collecting pollen, and they go crazy. And you wouldn't believe how fast they build up. And if we were able to open that hive, you wouldn't believe how many bees were in there and how much work they were doing and what they were storing. But they build up really, really quick. But in the springtime, they make you look really good, and you think, I can do this. I'm a good beekeeper because these bees are doing great. But in the fall and in the winter, it's a different story because you don't have all that nectar flow. So I've lost a lot of hives. I started in '99. I belong to a lot of the counties and area has beekeeper clubs. There's Kentuckiana Beekeepers in Louisville. Oldham County has a club. Bullitt County has a club. At first I belonged to these clubs, and that's the way we talk to other beekeepers about bees. It's through the clubs. Now it's all through Facebook and through social media. And used to, I would find out what beekeepers did once a month, and now it seems like I know what they do every day because they're always on Facebook or on these groups. But at the time, I built up to, the most I ever had was 50 hives, just by doubling my hive. I doubled the hives. I would split one hive into two, and then I would also buy packages. We have a problem in beekeeping. The biggest problem that we have is varroa mites, and varroa mites will kill a hive. And we have two different kinds of beekeepers. There's treatment-free beekeepers that don't want to put any chemicals or anything in the hives to kill the mites, and then there's beekeepers that treat. Well, I decided I was going to be a treatment-free beekeeper, and I wasn't going to treat. I had treated, and I had bought packages to the point. There's different ways you can start with bees. When you buy a package, it's probably the most common way. You get 3 pounds of bees in a package, and there's 3,000 to 4,000 bees in a pound, so you buy 10,000 bees and a queen in a package. But I was selling honey on the one hand, but I was buying bees on the other. And one day I looked up in the barn and I found, I hadn't paid attention to it, I just put my empty packages up in the barn. And I looked up there one day and there was at least 30 or 40 empty package boxes. And I'm like, I'm selling honey on one hand, but I'm spending all the money that I'm making on the other, buying packages. So I decided then and there that I wasn't gonna treat no more. The bees have survived all these years without us treating. I wasn't gonna do it. I was either gonna have bees without treating or they was gonna all die. And they all died. So my 50 hives went down to this winter. Through the last 3 or 4 years, I've had to put my stuff into storage and through moving and life circumstances, I guess. But I had 8 hives at my dad's house that we left on a trailer out of those 50. And I thought, well, these 8 hives are what's going to survive. And out of those 8 hives, we took 2 hives to the property this winter. We bought some property in the other side of Spencer County. And out of those 8 hives, they had all died but 1. So as of this winter, coming into spring, I had 1 hive. So I started getting online and starting to get back into beekeeping and looking at things and seeing what people were doing. And as we age, we get set in our ways and we do things the same old way. I'd never used, everybody was talking about swarm traps. And I had never, in 22 years, I've never used a swarm trap to catch bees. But everybody was talking about it. Beekeepers ride the coattails of researchers. And the researchers research all this stuff, and then a lot of the information that I'll tell y'all today is from, it's not because I know it, other than the fact that a researcher researched it and found out. But he researched, Dr. Thomas Seeley researched swarm traps and found out that 40 liters was the perfect size box for a swarm to move into. And at first I was resistant. I had these boxes here, and I just added this to hang it onto a tree. But I resisted I was like, I'm not doing that. I've had bees, I've left these boxes out and bees will just move into them, just sitting out in the patio or whatever. But I had all winter and I had plywood left over from our garage that I'd built. So I said, I'm gonna go ahead and build these swarm traps and try to catch some bees. So I built 20. I built 16 and I built 15 and Dad built 5. I think the one that you got left out here is Dad's, one that he built. But anyway, I got 20 swarm traps now with his help. And I put them out I put 2 here at Jan's and 2 at Dad's and I put 1 at Chris's, 2 at Chris's, several in Bullitt County, several in Spencer County. And out of those, I've caught 16 swarms out of those 20. Wow. And then I've caught 3 swarms just out in a tree. you build this 40-liter box.
Is
That's-
that what it is?
What's that?
That was my question. What's it look like?
It looks like this, but it's taller. It's in the tree out front. I'm sure y'all see it after we get done. But it looks like this, but it's taller. It sits about this high. And it's got frames in it, just like this one does.
Ah,
And though it's got a hole in the side of it, and those, like I say, the researcher had researched it, and that's the size they like, and they like the free space. And it worked. They worked great. I couldn't. I've been buying all these packages. Packages at the time were probably selling for. Now they sell for $130. I think I was paying $90 for a package. So
So
you
when
get.
you say it's a swarm trap, so they come there and then what?
It's got, you'll see it out there. It's got 2 holes right there, and they move into that and make that their home.
Oh, okay, so it's not like
They're not
is it-
trapped.
It's just a trap. It's
They
like
can-
a different hive.
They can leave anytime they want, and they're coming and going now. Me and Jim was just looking at them, and they're bringing in pollen, and the drones are coming and going, and yeah.
odd way to say it, but are you taking from other beekeepers, or is this just?
The swarm, those bees come. You don't know where they come from. I know one I did take from another beekeeper because the queen. I always go through and look for the queen. When I move that trap into a normal hive, I'll go through the frames and look for the queen. One of the queens I found had a mark on her already, so she came. I don't know who, but some beekeeper had marked her with a white dot, and
Is that right?
it was still on it. So that one did come from another beekeeper in that area, but I don't know. I have
So-
no.
When you say you move, do you pick up those things and move it to the?
Yeah,
The actual
when
box?
the swarm traps, I'll start kind of at the beginning on swarm trap. When bees are in the wild, and I think a lot of these come from the wild. Another thing about the packages is we pay all this money for a package that a beekeeper down in Georgia or Florida down south has shook out. He's had hive after hive of bees, and he'll shake all those bees out into a package. So you get bees from this hive and 5 or 6 hives, and then he'll find a queen from another hive and stick that in there with them. And they do okay in the spring, but they don't last through the winter good. So they're not resistant to any kind of mites or and European foul brood is a problem we have. American foul brood is a problem we have. They're not resistant to some of the things like, if you catch a swarm that's come out lived all winter in a tree, they've not been treated. They've not been messed with. They've made it on their own. So those genetics are a lot better. You're getting free bees, plus you're getting better genetics because they
So
haven't
you
been.
don't have a problem with the mites from the local bees, the ones that come
You
in?
do. They have what they call a mite bomb. You can have resistant. I can have a hive of bees that's resistant to the mites, but if the mites kill out the bees from another hive and these bees go in and rob it, there's so many mites in there they can't kill them all. So you do have a mite bomb, and you have to check. And it's one of the things I'm going to do different now that I've got new hives is I'm going to check. They've got a cup. I've got one in the truck. But they've got a cup that you scoop out bees and do what they call an alcohol wash. And you wash those bees, and it washes the mites off, and you count how many mites you have. The cup holds 300 bees.
Wow.
So 1% would be 3 mites. So if you have over 3 mites, you treat, and if you don't have over 3 mites, you don't treat. So you kind of treat as needed, but you can kind of keep a better eye on it now than you used to be able to.
So you can actually see the mites?
You can see the mites. Yeah, they're more than big enough to see. They're red. I don't know what they're. Maybe a fire ant compared. They're a little smaller than a fire ant.
Wow.
But yeah, you can see them. It's hard to see on the bee itself, but you can see it on the brood. The brood is white. The larva is white. And if there's a mite on it, you can see it, and you'll see it crawling around. So, but anyway, yeah, the swarm traps, when these hives in the wild or hives from another beekeeper swarm, they look for a new home, either in a tree. There's more, people don't realize how many houses have bees that's moved. The bees have left a tree or an area and moved into a hole under the eave of a house. There's a lot of bees in houses. But even those are untreated bees. Those are good genetics. They made it. They were strong enough to swarm. So they're gonna move out and move into a limb on a tree, And sometimes we catch them. I belong to a swarm team in Spencer County, and we catch them sometime hanging on a limb of a tree. But if they stay there long enough on that limb, they're going to find a home that's suitable for them, either in a hollow tree or a house or whatever. And when they find that, they do a dance, a bee dance on that cluster, and communicate that to the rest of that cluster, and they'll all take off and go to that new home. And I think when Jim seen this one first moved in, I think they was just moving in because he seen a big cluster of bees right on the opening. They had found that swarm trap, but they're from somewhere, either a wild tree or it's a feral swarm, or I'm assuming I might find a dot on her too. I don't know. But that's what the swarm traps are for. But once they move into that swarm trap, that box is about like this one. And these frames, this is a sheet of wax foundation that's wired. It's got wires running both ways. And they'll draw that out. They'll draw comb on that.
And when you see them on a limb, do they just look like a bunch of bees?
They look like a cluster, just a big
Just
cluster.
sitting there.
And that's why when people call, we say, well, what size is it? Is it like a volleyball? Is it like a basketball? Is it big? There was one swarm I caught, and it was probably the size of 6 footballs. It was huge. It was probably 20,000 bees in that, and it was from one of our beekeepers. One of his hives had swarmed. He knew it. He had caught a swarm. I had asked about a swarm. People call us, I think there's 15 members on the swarm team, and they'll call us and say, hey, I've got a swarm. Well, somebody had called and said they had a swarm, and I had asked about it, and he asked about it, and he got it. And I think he kind of felt bad, and he said, well, I've got a swarm at my house, and I'm out of town. Do you want to get it? And I said, yeah, and it was huge. But his hives were right there. It come out of his house, and he let me have that swarm. But it was a huge swarm. But yeah, when those bees move into this box, they'll take that frame with this wax foundation on it, and they'll draw it out, draw comb on it like that. And they use the comb, the strong comb, is what they store everything in. That's what the queen lays her eggs in. That's what they put the pollen in. That's what they put the nectar in to make honey.
Wow.
That's what they use put everything in, is these seals. And this is a honey. This box here is a honey super because it's shallow. There's a deeper box that's called a deep or a high body, but it's where normally the brood would be raised. But they do everything that they do. If I put this in a hive, they would clean all this up. They clean it up spotless and fill it. They would fill this one with honey, hopefully, if I put it on the top, if it was a strong hive. But from a swarm trap, they start drawing this out, and I'll take it and put it into a full, the box would be deep enough to fit this frame. I would take that home and put it into a regular hive, and it would be the width of that one. And they would start filling that up. And once they get that one, fill up a whole box, then I add another box. They fill that box, and I add another box on top of that. And they just keep building. You'll see the hive get taller and taller.
So that's why.
Other bees can get in there.
They protect the hive.
Oh, they'll go after. Okay.
There's those guards bees that sting you. They're gonna keep. There's a scent that they have that they know when another bee is not from their hive. So they guard that hive.
So if I'm riding along in the country and I see box after box, they've added that because the first one was overflowing or whatever?
Yeah, once this box gets to 8 frames, once they've covered 8 frames and bees and brood and all their stuff, then I'll add another box. So yeah, if it's a good beekeeper, every one of those boxes are full except the top one, and they're working on the top one.
Wow.
Now there's some new people that's starting. She had her stack, she just had a nuke, a small hive. This would be a nuke, considered a nuke. She just had a nuke worth of bees, and she had like 6 or 7 boxes high, but she had way too much space. Bees do better when you have just enough space. So if there's 4 frames in this box. If there's 3 frames of bees, this is where I want them, and they fill out that 4th frame, and then I'll put them in a 10-frame box. and that you want them to fill that box up before you put another 10 frame box on it. But they do better in the smaller space. They can keep the pests down. We also have small hive beetles. That's more of a nuisance than anything, but if you've got 10 frames in a box and only 3 frames of bees, those other 7 frames, the small hive beetles can do whatever they want. So you want to have just enough frames in there for the bees. Anybody else?
I was gonna ask a minute ago, so you're saying that this guy, out of his own bees, they swarmed like they left his home? Is that what you're saying? Why would they do that?
That's what bees have. Their first instinct is survival. They call them a superorganism, I think is what they call them, because a bee can't live by itself. It has to have all the other bees to live. But their first instinct is survival, and their second instinct, the way they reproduce, is to swarm.
Okay.
So they're gonna swarm.
So
if
if,
you don't-
if he'd been there, he just would have started another.
Well, yeah, if you don't do something about it, those bees are gonna swarm. And we was talking a while ago that you can have bees for different reasons. I get frustrated sometimes because I see people let their bees swarm and they lose bees, and I know they're losing honey, and I know they're losing bees, and it's frustrating to me because I raised mine to have more bees and to have more honey. But some people, you can just, if Jan wanted to have some hives here and just to pollinate, she could put a box out here and just leave it, and they would pretty much take care of themselves. They're going to swarm and they won't make any extra honey, but they would survive in that box. And that might be what she wanted to do. You can do whatever you want. There's so many different things that you can get from a hive. We've got beekeepers that raise bees just to have more bees. They'll raise them in these nukes, in these small boxes like that. And when they get too big for them, they'll make another small box and split it off into that, and then they sell those nukes. So we've got 2 or 3 beekeepers that don't want honey. They just want to sell the bees. If somebody wants some more bees, you can buy a nuke from him. This box full of bees sells for about $170. So he makes pretty good money and don't have to worry about honey or extracting it or any of that, just by selling boxes of bees.
Are they out of danger now? I mean, there was a few years that they were
Not,
coming.
no,
No, they're not out of danger.
not really. They had that CCD scare or whatever, and I'm not sure that's that it was the things that they thought it was. I think there's a lot of pesticide that they genetically modify in the corn crop, and there's a lot of stuff that makes it hard to keep bees. A lot of beekeepers lose hives during the wintertime, and there's a lot of reasons. Mites is probably the main reason, but they're also pesticide poisoning, and when they're bringing all that stuff in and storing it up for the winter, well, they might not eat what's tempered with pesticide until the wintertime, and then they die in the wintertime. So, but yeah, they're still not out of danger, but there's a lot more beekeepers now because of all that. A lot of people got into beekeeping to save the bees, so it was a good thing, and we still would like to see. That's one reason I do stuff like this, YouTube and things, is to help people get into beekeeping and teach them, and hopefully people would want to have some hives and do that.
So how can the average person who doesn't want to be a beekeeper assist the bees?
You mean by having bees or by
No, just by,
helping out?
yeah.
Buying honey. That would help a lot.
I mean, certain kind of plants or.
Well, you can plant. It's always good. We have a state agerist. Her name's Tammy Potter, Dr. Tammy Potter, for Kentucky, and she is big on pollination. And she's always planting, and it's always great to plant stuff that the bees like. Buckwheat. I mean, there's all kind of stuff. She's a lot better at that stuff, of course, than I am. But if I wanted to plant a crop, if I wanted to plant some stuff at my house and have that for honey, I would have to plant like a solid 300 or 400 acres of it. I can help the bees out and have stuff that they like, but I can't really have a crop of honey off of that without having, that one of the biggest honey producing states is North Dakota, and it's because they grow sweet clover, and they have acres and acres and acres of nothing but clover. We have acres and acres and acres of soybeans and corn. So our bees have to, and another thing that happens too now is the fence rows are all getting cleaned out. You know, the fence rows used to be a big source. Everybody left their fence rows. Had all these big wide fence rows that had weeds and flowers and all kind of stuff in it. Now everybody, the corn and soybeans going for so much, they clean all the way. There's no big fence rows left for the bees to forage on.
Oh, we have some.
Huh?
We have some fence rows that have been let go.
Oh, yeah?
So there's lots of bees.
That's what I'm doing. I want it for the bees.
That's that's your whole plan. Yes, ma'am. The queen. A lot of people have a misconception about the queen bee that she runs the hive. She does not run the hive. She does what she's told. What? I know, that'd be hard to do. She does what the worker bees have her do, I guess would be the best way to put it. They clean out cells. There's queen cells, queen cups in every hive that would be a replacement for her. If they want her to lay in that cup to make her replacement, she will lay in that cup. She's not in charge of the hive. She does what the worker bees have her do.
And
No.
how many does she lay at one time?
She lays between 2,000 and 2,500 eggs a day. Jim and I was talking a while ago. He said, "How long does a bee live in the summertime?" And a worker bee only lives 3 weeks in the summer, and they die because they wear their wings out. They work themselves to death. A queen bee will live. She's good for a couple years, and I've heard of them living 4 or 5 maybe. But her egg laying will really slow down when she gets older. And usually, what'll happen in a hive, and most beekeepers won't see it, is they'll replace her when her egg production stops being what it should be. To replace all those dead bees, they'll have her lay in one of those queen cups and make a new queen.
I'm confused about that whole thing. How is it just one queen? Like, what is there other ones that get laid along the way that they?
Well, all of her, when a queen, when a virgin queen emerges and she goes out and gets mated, she'll mate with about 15 drones, 15 to 20 drones, and they mate in the air. And once she's mated, she comes back to the hive, and she's mated for a lifetime. So she's got all that sperm is stored in a spermatheca. And when she lays an egg, she can choose whether or not to fertilize that egg, which makes it a worker bee, or not fertilize it, which makes it a drone. So she chooses and it's all dark. All this work is done and it's all dark inside the hive.
That's so weird.
So she checks the size of that cell, and if it's a worker cell, which all these would be, this is the honey storage, but all these would be worker cells. If it's that size, she's going to fertilize that egg that she lays in there. But when any of those fertilized eggs can be turned into a queen by the way the workers feed it. They feed it royal jelly, and they can turn. What they'll do when they go to replace her is they'll take about 15. They'll have her lay about 15 eggs, and when they'll hatch in 3 days to a larva, and they start feeding it royal jelly, and they feed it an abundance of royal jelly, which makes her bigger and fertile.
How do they know the sex of the bee? Like, how do they determine male, female when they're?
The size of the cell, I think, is the way they know. 95% of the bees in the hive are fertilized or worker bees. All the females do all the work.
Oh, so they're female bees. Okay.
They're all female bees. The drones, the male bees don't do any work.
That's about right.
I won't tell them what you said. all the male bees do is they'll go out, they come in the hive, eat the honey, eat the pollen, and go out and look for a queen to mate with. And they get wore out, and they come back and get all stored back up, and then go out and look for a queen to mate with again.
Is it true that if you're gonna go get a swarm that's in a tree or something, you get the queen bee and they all come with her? You
Yes.
get the queen bee first?
You try. I had one swarm I collected the other day out of a little tree, and it wouldn't go in a box. I had them going in a box. They had started to go in. Usually they'll march in. If you just have a box there and have the opening where they can get to it, it's neat to see because they'll just start from the outside. They'll just start marching in the box because they know that's a good home. But this hive was marching in a box, and I left to go get another one, and I come back and they come back out. So I got another hive and took over there and got them going into it. And as fast as I had them going in, they was coming back out. I couldn't get them. I don't know if it was a queen thing or I don't know what it was. But I called one of the other beekeepers and he said, well, just use smoke and see if you can smoke them in. So they tried to get away from the smoke and went into the box after I started smoking them. But yeah, they'll usually have, when they swarm, they'll have the old, normally, nothing is all the time, but normally they'll have the old queen with the swarm. So if that swarm trap that's out here is a normal one, it'll have the old queen in there. And when we mark the queens, all the ones that I get, I try to put a mark on them, and all the years have colors. So the color for 2021 is white, and the color for 2020 is blue. So if she's a virgin queen, if she's an old queen, I mark her blue. But if she's a virgin queen, I mark her white. So, but some of the swarms that I've caught out of these traps are what they call after swarms, where they'll have the original hive will swarm and with the old queen, and there's still too many bees in a box, so they'll have after swarm and they'll have a virgin queen in it. So I've got a couple that I can't find eggs in or couldn't last weekend, but it's because there was a virgin queen and she hasn't went out and got mated yet.
So she always has to leave the box.
Yeah, she has to, and it's weird too because we could have 10 hives sitting right in this area, and they know which box, that she knows which box that she flew out of, and she'll fly back to that box. And she flies, again, this is research, I don't know this to be true, but the research says that she flies up to 9 miles away to get mated. Because if she got mated around here, she could be mating with her sons. So she flies farther than their forage area. Their forage area is 2 miles. They'll normally go 2 miles around. If that was their hive, they would go 2 miles from here. But they'll go up to 5 if they have to, but they won't go 9. So she, according to the research, she'll go 9 to mate with some where she's not related to them, and she'll mate with those drones that she's not related to. So it's hard to, the genetics is hard to control because you never know where the drones come from. A lot of beekeepers will try to put drone colonies, if they raise queens, they'll try to put drone colonies out side of the area, and hopefully, they don't know, but hopefully they mate with those drones that's from good genetics or whatever. But it's hard to know.
Hey,
Yes.
I think I read in a book somewhere that like the queens like fight for their position. Is that not true?
Do they what?
Like they fight like for the position of the queen?
They'll make, the workers will make 15 new queens, 15 or 20 new queens out of those eggs that's fertilized. Out of those 15 or 20, they're all going to hatch at about the same time. And when they hatch, they emerge, they don't hatch. When they emerge, they're going to fight it out.
Oh, okay.
So all those, if there's 20, all 20 is going to fight it out. So you always get the best queen out of 20.
What? Oh, they kill each other?
They'll kill, 19 of them will get killed, and one will survive. And that's why a lot of times when you buy a queen, you don't get a very good queen because he's raising those queens. Like if it was all 20 of them, he's using all 20. Whereas if I had a hive that requeened herself, I've got the best one out of 20. I can't get up. I don't know where to go.
just go on the front, babe. In front of the table. There you go.
There, that's better. No, it's fine. But yeah, they'll fight it out. You get the best queen out of 20. So you get a really good queen if they raise their own. The ones we buy, I feel bad because I've had people start with bees and buy queens or buy packages, and they don't survive in the winter times a lot of times. So I'm hoping these swarm traps and the bees you get from swarms will be a lot better. And then treating, you've got to treat. The treatments they have now are a lot softer than the treatments they had before when I was keeping bees. The treatments, they don't sound soft. The best one that they have now is called oxalic acid. Stephen uses that a lot on his hives. But it's found in it's found in normal everyday stuff that we eat. It's not synthetic at all. It's all natural. But it's supposed to. It provides a fog. You fog the hive with it, and it kills the mites and doesn't kill the bees. But it's a natural treatment. So that's one I'm gonna try to use. And there's a couple other natural treatments that you can use. That's not chemicals, but you can still take care of your mites. Yes.
How often do you have to fog the hive?
There's a lot of people that's doing it 3 or 4 times. They do it in the wintertime. It's better to do it when there's no brood. The mites have to be exposed to the fog. But they'll do that in the wintertime, and they'll do another treatment in the summer to try to knock them back a little bit.
What
But
are the bees doing in the wintertime? Are
they cluster. They don't hibernate. They cluster. The colder it gets, the tighter that ball of bees will get. And the center of that cluster will be 90 degrees in the coldest weather. And the outside bees, when they get cold, they rotate with the warm inside bees. So they keep rotating to stay warm, but they shutter their wings and they'll stay warm in that cluster. Yeah, they're fascinating, all this stuff.
So in the the months where they don't pollinate, do they all the worker bees, are they still alive and live longer in periods of warm?
Yeah, in the wintertime, there's a different makeup to the bee than there is in the summertime too. One thing, they don't work as much, so they don't wear out as quick. So a bee in the wintertime will live 5 to 6 months, where a bee in the summertime will only live 3 weeks. But they call them fat bees. They build up their fat bodies, and they build up enough. You got to be really careful that you develop healthy bees in the fall, because that's the bees that's supposed to live all winter.
How do you develop bees?
Well, you just got to make sure that they're healthy. You got to make sure that if they don't have enough honey, that you feed them. We feed bees sugar water. We mix 50-50 sugar water, and we can feed them and make them heavier. You got to have a really heavy hive going into wintertime. We feed them pollen patties. It's a protein source. They get protein from pollen and carbohydrates from the honey or the sugar water. And they say that the sugar water is actually better than the nectar, because a lot of the nectar, a lot of the honey, the darker it is, the more stuff there is in the honey. The more stuff there is that they have to cleanse out.
So is it a granulated or like a natural sugar?
What's that?
The type of sugar you use?
The same table sugar what you use on the table. They just mix it with water, and like I say, a lot of beekeepers there's some beekeepers that'll take all their honey and then feed them back sugar with it. Because, especially up north, because they can't get out and do their business and get rid of it, so it makes it where they don't have to, because it's a cleaner source of carbohydrates. So a lot of people say it's better.
What do you put the sugar water in?
Different types of feeders. I use a in-hive. It would take the place of, you take a frame out and it would slide down in there, and it's got a cavity, and you just pour the sugar water into it. But there's feeders that go on the top. You can take a mason jar and poke holes in it, and put it on a hole in the top of the hive, or there's some that will sit on top of that, and the bees can come up and get into the sugar water that way. So there's a lot of different feeding methods that you can use to feed them.
Feed them year round?
I don't. One of the things I never did before is I always thought if they get their own, they get their own nectar out in the wild, and I never fed. Probably as much as I could have. But I'm going to try to check this time and make sure that the hives are heavy, and if they're not, I might go ahead and feed them. And make sure, because I think it makes a healthier hive. They'll be a lot healthier if they're fed better. But the bees can get out, when it's like this, the bees have no trouble getting out and getting nectar or whatever they need. But if it starts raining for 3 or 4 days, they're stuck in the hive with whatever they got, however much or however little.
And you keep it in the hive like off in January when it's cold, or you take it out?
No, I would feed in the fall up to cold weather. Once it got cold, then they would have everything they need to make it through the winter. So usually don't feed in the winter.
So the reason that they don't die, the reason that they die in the wintertime is because is it that the mites are not being fed, and what's the real reason?
The mites, what the mites feed off of is the bodies of the bees. So they're getting chewed up by the mites for one thing, and for another thing, the mites carry viruses, and there's several viruses that it just makes the hive weak, and you won't know. It's weird because your strongest hive, like I say, beekeepers look like heroes or zeros, because you'll go through spring and look like a hero, and you got this big old strong hive, and maybe you got more than one, but this one's really, I know this one's fine. But that's the one in the wintertime that'll end up dying, because it's got so many mites, it's so big and got so many mites in there, and you don't know all the viruses that they've got. You can't,
So it's mostly the mites, not the temperature at all.
No,
Because
no,
if
code
if they're
does,
in North Dakota, or if you say North or South Dakota?
North, both, but North Dakota.
You know, I mean, it's cold all the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah, code doesn't kill,
Okay.
code does not kill bees. They've kept bees down to 60 below zero,
Oh,
and
wow.
the code will not kill the bees. If that condensation, what happens is the condensation will build up in the hive, and it'll collect on the cover and drip down on the bees, and that kills the bees. Because they're breathing, they have to breathe, and they'll have condensation, a lot of condensation in there. You've got to have it, if you pack it up, everybody wants, when they start out, they want to get a hive and they want to wrap it up and insulate it and just seal it up tight. If you seal it up tight, you're killing the bees, because there's no way for that moisture to get out. That moisture has got to be out, it's got to get out in the summertime and the wintertime. Right now, when they're collecting honey, I'll open up the top of a hive and they'll have water laying on the inner cover. This white one is the outer cover, and this one is the inner cover. And when I open up a hive, a lot of times this will have a lot of water on it, because they're trying to evaporate the honey in the summertime. So they've got to get it from, it's like water when it goes in there, and the nectar is, and they've got to get it down to 18%. So they've got to take a lot of water out of the hive. It's got to have a lot of ventilation. Yes, sir.
The quality of the honey. When I buy some, I see unfiltered and regular honey. Which is the best? The
Well,
unfiltered?
they say there's different schools of thought on that, I guess. A lot of people want a honey that's not filtered, that's screened. We run it through a double screen, and a lot of people want it that way because it's still got the pollen and it's still got some stuff that's really good for you in it. But when you eat it, it's not smooth. It's got a little bit of grit to it. I don't like to have grit in my honey. So I run it through a double screen, and then I go through a nylon cloth. But that's the extent of the filtering. But you can filter it to a point where you take all the good stuff. Honey's got a ton of you can live off of honey by itself and eat nothing else. It's one of the only foods that you can live off of. It's
Does it have protein? Does honey have protein?
It's got a lot of stuff. I'm not sure. I don't know that protein's one of them, but I do know you can live off of honey by itself. Honey is something that lasts forever. Honey never will go bad. They did, for my stepson's sake, I do know that they found honey in the pyramids, and it was still good. It was from when they built the pyramids, and they found it in there. It was granulated. Honey will turn to sugar, but it was still good. You can warm it up. When your honey granulates, you can warm it up gently, and it goes right back to a liquid.
What's the thing about they always say get honey from your area for allergies?
Well, probably 80% of the people I sell honey to buy it because of their allergies. And if you buy it from the local area that has the trees that you're getting your pollen allergies from, the honey builds up an immunity because it's coming from those same trees. So you're getting some of that pollen every time you eat it. So that's why you want honey from your area. I think they say a 50-mile radius. If you can get honey from a 50-mile radius, I tell everybody take a teaspoon in the morning and a teaspoon every night and do it for at least 2 weeks, and you usually notice the difference. But honey is something too. If you ever get hives that, if somebody buys a quart this year, they want 2 quarts next year, and if they buy 2 quarts this year, they want a gallon next year. They always, or they'll come back, and it sells out every year. That no beekeeper I know can keep enough honey to supply everybody that wants it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So is like the honey you buy at Kroger just as healthy as like what you make?
No.
Let's say if it's raw honey from Kroger.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say if it's that. How does that compare?
It doesn't. It's not the same. They'll blend like sous vide honey. They blend all their. One thing they're going to do that a beekeeper's not going to do is they're going to heat it so it don't turn to sugar so quick. When you heat honey, it eliminates a lot of the good stuff for you, and it makes it darker, and it makes the flavor not as good, but it won't granulate as quick. Look out! But they'll blend it too. When you buy a jar of sous vide honey, they want that jar to taste like the last jar, so they'll blend it. Beekeepers, everybody wants to tell me, well, I really like your honey. Your honey is really good. Well, I ain't got nothing to do with the flavor of that honey. And it might be totally different next year. It's whatever the bees get. It might be getting, might be getting clover honey this year. They might be getting tulip poplar or black locust next year. I had one guy that called and it was just really upset. He's like, this is not, what did you do to this honey? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. He's like, well, it doesn't taste like the honey I got last year. I don't like it. I'm like, it's whatever the bees put in there. I had to talk him down. I mean, you know, I don't have anything to do with but people still come up to me all the time. Well, I like the flavor of your honey, so I'm buying honey from you. Well, I don't have anything to do with it. Don't have nothing to do with it. It don't have anything to do with me. I take it out of the hive, spin it. We've got an extractor, and it spins it by centrifugal force, and it takes the honey out of the comb, and it runs down to the bottom of the barrel, and I drain it out. It goes through that double screen, and then I take it through a nylon cloth, and then I put it in a bottle after it goes through a nylon cloth. So it's whatever. Some of it's going to be dark, and some of it's going to be light. It's whatever they get.
Different than a cheesecloth? Or is it a type of cheesecloth?
It's a nylon cloth. I think it's a little finer than a cheesecloth.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a nylon cloth is all it is. But it makes it smooth. When you take a spoonful of it, you don't get any grit. And with just the screen, you get a little bit of grit. It's better for you, but it's a little bit gritty, and I just don't like the grit. So, but you know, some people, that's what they want. But there's, I don't know how we're doing on time.
47 minutes.
I think you had a question over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Judy. Ruby was wanting to know if you brought any of your honey with you to sell.
I did bring a little bit. I didn't have the intention of trying to sell y'all honey, but I do have some myself.
First jar.
Only tortilla chips. Troy,
Yes.
tell about the woman that said to you, I do not have a swarm in my wall. Tell her about that house.
Me and Dad went to a swarm call. It was I think it was on Southern Parkway. It was downtown.
That's not the one that was on the news, was it?
No, this
There
has
was
been
one.
several years ago. But these were really, I think it was Southern Parkway, but they were really old houses, but they'd all been remodeled. They were just immaculate.
Yeah.
Immaculate old houses. And they had a bee on a tree, just the side of a tree. And some boys had been throwing basketball at it. But they made them stop and called us, and we come out there. And usually if you find a swarm that's not found a home yet, you can just look around in a circle and see where the bees are coming from. And so I started looking around in a circle, and the neighbor lady was there. And I looked up in the eave of her house, and I could see bees coming and going. And so I said, she was kind of prim and proper. And I said, I know where the bees come from. And she said, where? And I said, they come from your house. No, sir, they did not come from my house. I don't care what you say, there's not bees in my house. I said, yes, ma'am. There's bees in your house. I said, they're coming. I showed her, I said, they're coming and going. And she's seen them coming and going. And she said, I don't care what you say, there's not bees in my house. I'm like, if you take me on the other side of that wall, I'll prove to you.
But get them out, right?
There's bees in that house. And she took me and my dad in the house, and there was a bedroom up there that was just immaculate and just, I mean, perfect. And we went to the other side of that wall and put your ear up against it, and you could just hear a ton of bees on the other side of that drywall. And I said, put your ear up against the wall right there. And she did, and she about had a conniption. She could not believe it. She found, that's what she wanted. Dad went back with a buddy, and they plasticked off the room and took out all the drywall and got everything out. But it was, she didn't want to believe. When she put her ear up against, she quit arguing then. When she put her ear up against, but you can usually see when they come out of a hive to swarm, they swarm within 50 feet of where they come out. They just go to the first tree they see and stop. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard when we eat honey, should we eat honey in the same area or buy it where it's made and in the same area where you live?
Yeah.
Well, I missed that. I had to.
Yeah. For your allergies,
Yes.
yeah, it's
Okay.
better to be from your
Okay, I
area.
missed that one out.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least have the same trees. You could be farther away than 50 miles. I guess if it was east or west, but not maybe north or south. You know, as long as it had the same. A lot of our honey around here comes from trees. Like I say, Kentucky's not the best place to make honey. We have corns and soybeans, and you don't get honey off corns and soybeans. So they're getting honey off y'all's flowers and fence rows. And I took some bees in town. My sister had a house in J-Town, and I took some bees in there, and they made a whole lot more honey in there than they do out here, because everybody's got dressed up yards in there, and everybody that don't have dressed up yards has got grass that's full of clover. You know, it's not bees, or it's not corn and soybeans. So
So tell us about those of us who use chemicals to spray
I was getting ready to say that. Yeah, Jan asked me a question. She said that I use, you know, she's got the roses and she has to use pesticide on her roses, and she asked, is that going to hurt the bees? And what I told her was, those bees are going to go 2 miles from here on a regular basis. If that was going to hurt those bees, if I was going to tell her, no, you can't use pesticide, which she wouldn't listen to me. But if I was going to try to tell her that, I'd have to go to everybody's house in a 2 mile radius. You just can't. People are going to spray their yards, and they're going to spray their roses, and they're going to spray something. You might lose some bees from that. Most of your labels on your pesticide spray will have instructions to keep from killing bees. Most of them will say, spray at a certain time in the evening, or they'll have label instructions that tell you how not to kill bees. And if you go by that, it's fine. But there's gonna be some bees killed. You just can't control everything that the bee's gonna visit. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and one of the guys on a YouTube video was talking about he had raised cows and goats and sheep and all those. You know, he had to keep the fence rows, check after storms, make sure the fence was still good. And he said bees are just trespassing. Because you can put bees out and they're going to go, you know, every farm around here, they're going to go get their stuff done. So they're going to go, and you know, if I had 20 acres, I'm limited on the number of cows I can have, or 100 acres or whatever. I can only have so many cows or so many sheep or so many goats. I'm not limited on bees other than what the area will support as far as nectar goes. So I can have unlimited amount of bees, where if I wanted to raise cows, unless I had a whole bunch of land, I'd be limited on how many cows I could have. So it's neat that you can have as many as you want to take care of, or got a wife that'll help you take care of.
So how about that hat and all that? You're going to show us how you look and that?
No, I probably won't show you how I look. This is the only bee suit I wear. I just wear a jacket. You probably don't need that. Most of the time you just need a hood. I'll go through some of this stuff really quick. I keep, in my pocket, I keep a queen catcher. I catch my queen in that.
Huh. How do you do that? Just catch her?
Yeah, she'll be on a frame.
Oh.
She'll be on a frame and crawling around, and I'll just open that up, put it on her, and just let it close up.
Are
on
you kidding me?
And then once I get her caught, this has got blue all over it because I marked a bunch of them blue. I just use these paint pens, a white one for this year, and then a blue one for last year to mark her with. I think that's all I got in there. But I'll take her out, and just a queen's got a stinger, but she won't sting. I don't know of anybody being stung by a queen. She uses her stinger to kill other queens with. So those 20, those other 20 queens, she's gonna use her stinger to kill those. And she can sting multiple times, but the worker bee can only sting one time. And everybody asks if I get stung, and yeah, if you're gonna keep bees, you're gonna get stung. And but not as much as you think. I was out the other day with shorts and that's it. Well, I had a shirt, but I didn't have no bee suit and didn't get stung. But then I was out this past weekend and had to put gloves on because they were trying to sting my hands.
If you watch his videos on YouTube, sometimes you can hear him go, oh!
I'm not the most, you see all these guys on YouTube and they get stung and it's like, hey, I got stung a while ago. Oh. And they won't make a sound or anything. I'm like, oh, I'm all flinched. I'm not careful they are good. I'll go through the rest of the stuff. This, I showed you drawn comb. That's drawn comb. This is foundation. This is starter strip. You can just put a little bit of comb at the top and they'll draw that out. They'll draw comb over that whole frame. And they'll do it. There's probably some in that swarm trap out there, and I would bet they would have that whole area filled up already with comb. We showed you the outer cover. This is the inner cover. This side goes down in the summertime. If you was to put this side down, it's just got space. In the summertime, they're going to fill all this up with bird comb. There's a thing called bee space. If you violate bee space, they're either going to glue it shut if it's too tight, or they're going to bird comb it if it's too loose. And this would be way too loose, and they would put bird comb and glue all that together. And then the only other thing is the bottom. This is the bottom board, and this happens to be a screen bottom board. So this provides ventilation, and then the mites will fall through that too. A lot of the mites will just fall through the screen and fall out of the hive.
So that's in the stack, you don't have a board over it, that's the screen, you
Yeah.
put the next box on top of
Yeah.
the screen.
And a lot of people, I use a deep box that'll hold these frames. But if you're getting a little older, if a lady wanted to keep bees, sometimes she'll just use a shallow box and put the bees in that box. That's normally used for honey. I use it for just honey, but you can let them raise brood in this box, and they fill that one up, put another shallow. And then when you got to move them, they're half as heavy. They're half the thickness or half the depth of a full-size box. But once they fill up 8 frames in here, I would put another box and just keep adding. And what they'll do is they'll put all the brood in the bottom, and they'll have what they call a honey cap. And once they get that honey cap, it'll be only honey from there up. So they'll have a certain area for their brood in the bottom, and then all the top boxes will be honey. And you can I've had them go over my head. Some of them will go. The average in Kentucky is a 5-gallon bucket, but some hives will make, you get an average of a 5-gallon bucket, but some hives will make none, and other hives will make 20 gallons.
Wow.
So it averages out, but it's not an average. It's genetics and queen, and there's races of bees. Some bees will just make more honey than other bees. There's Caucasian bees, buckfast bees, Russian. There's all different kind of races, and they all get different qualities.
You said something earlier on the, what'd you call the box sitting over there?
The nuke.
What'd you call it, swarm box?
Oh, swarm trap.
Swarm trap. You said something about if you have 10 in there, but they only fill up 7, you get what? Did you say? You get something. The other. If you have too many.
Oh yeah, if you had if you had too many empty frames in here, it basically leaves room for the bugs to run them up. You know, they can't. If you've got small hive beetles in here and they're filling up 8 frames and there's only 2 frames left, they'll corral them, and they'll glue them in. If you give them enough time, they'll use propolis as another product of the hive, and they'll use propolis and they'll glue them in. And corral them and take care of them. But they are very smart. There's all different, I'll say one more thing, and then if y'all got questions, I'll answer however many questions y'all got. But there's all different kind of products in the hive. It's not just honey. There's honey, and of course we can collect that. There's beeswax. I just sold the rest of my beeswax a week ago.
Was it 16
So
pounds?
16 pounds of beeswax was the last of it. But you can sell honey, you can sell beeswax, you can make candles, you can make lip balm out of beeswax,
Furniture polish.
furniture polish. It makes an excellent lubricant for screws and stuff. I sold some to a muzzle loader that would coat the muzzle loading balls in beeswax to seal the ball up in the barrel.
Some of us are quilters and you can use beeswax for your quilting or your needles.
For the needle, yeah. It's a really good lubricant, more than I ever realized. But there's beeswax in the hive.
In the thread.
And the thread too, yeah. Have bowstring. A lot of people wax their bowstrings with it for a bow. But propolis is another thing, and you can collect that. And it's made out of tree sap. It's very antibacterial. It keeps the bacteria out of the hive.
What'd you call that?
Propolis. Yep. Royal jelly is something that some people collect. Some people collect pollen, and they'll sell that or use that. Pollen is a really high source of protein. It really tastes really bad, but it's really good for you. But it's nasty, man. That stuff's nasty.
What part is the royal jelly? I don't understand.
Royal jelly is secreted by the bees to feed the larvae with, and it's a white, milky substance.
And so you get it out separately?
You can. There's people that have their certain types of frames that they can collect that out of.
Oh.
But it's more of a tedious process. It sells for a whole lot of money, but it takes a long time to collect a little bit, but it sells for a lot. So, but there's just all kind of products from the hive that's useful, and just about everything is really, really good for you. You know, like I say, that pollen, amazing.
So like when you buy clover honey and you say that you don't know what your honey's gonna be every year, it could be different. So if you have an order for clover honey, how do you get that?
I don't know if it's gonna be clover or not. If somebody that was in South Dakota or North Dakota and they've got thousands acre of clover, they can label it clover because they know that's what it is. I know black locust when I see it. I know tulip poplar when I see it. I know when it's blooming. And if I put the super on top of this hive and the tulip poplar's blooming and I extract that honey and it's a really dark honey, then I'm 99% sure that's tulip poplar honey.
Really?
Yeah. But that's the only ones I've been able to tell is black locust and tulip poplar.
So tulip poplar honey is dark.
Is a really sweet. Most dark honey is really strong, but tulip poplar is a really sweet dark honey.
Okay.
It's a spring honey. Your spring honey is a table honey. Your fall honey they call cooking honey because it's really strong, and unless you just really like honey, people don't like it. It tastes like molasses. A lot of it does. It's really strong flavored honey.
I got a question. Do bees and wasps like each other, or do they?
No.
They can't survive in the same
No.
area.
They'll be. I'm sure that some of my swarm traps that haven't caught bees, it's because there's a wasp nest in it. They won't move in there if there's a wasp nest in it. They don't survive together. And if they come into a hive full of honeybees, the honeybees will kill it and anything else that comes in it. They will ball it and kill it. Whatever it takes to kill it, they'll kill it. Anybody else?
The new place across from Hat Makers on Taylorsville Road.
Honey Depot?
Yeah. Do you know anything about that, or?
Yeah, he does a lot of classes up there. He sells a lot of odds and ends stuff.
I've never been. I just saw that. Is that local? He advertises local honey.
Yeah, he has a lot of honey. I'm not sure where that honey comes from, if it's his or he buys from other beekeepers. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's got hives. He's got a lot of hives. So it could be he. I don't know. I don't know a lot about him. I hear mixed reviews on him.
Yeah.
I've
heard some mixed reviews.
It's handy for me because if I need to go up there and get a queen catcher or something little, I can stop. I don't have, Kelly's is Kelly's is in Litchfield and then Daydance in Frankfurt. So the other places are a long ways away. So I'm glad to have somebody close, but I've heard mixed reviews on them.
Yeah.
How often you have to extract the honey out of it? Just once a year, or
I usually do it in July.
just one?
Yeah, usually just once, yeah. But sometimes you'll get a fall crop and you can extract. And but it'd be really dark and it won't be. People don't normally like it as well as they do spring honey. So, and we don't normally get fall honey. We usually leave it for the bees. It takes the bees 60 pounds of honey. That 5-gallon bucket that is the average honey production for Kentucky. That's also what it takes for the bees to survive our winter. So we've got to leave them a 5-gallon bucket worth of honey inside there. So we can take off whatever's on top of that, but we can't. We got to leave them 5 gallons worth of honey in there.
I want to know how much a queen catcher costs.
They're cheap. You talking about this?
I thought they'd be expensive anyway.
This?
For catch a queen.
Most beekeepers, and I do too sometimes, but most people just pick them up.
Really?
Most of the bees in a hive, the young bees can't sting either. They're too young. Their stingers aren't stiff enough to sting you. So most of the bees that you're actually looking at can't sting you.
You say a drone didn't have a stinger?
Drone can't sting. I had a buddy that would take drones and put them in his mouth to show everybody how tough he was.
Can we tell by looking the difference between a worker and a drone?
Yeah, drones are big and fat.
Big and fat.
Workers are small and streamlined, and then a queen is streamlined, but it's a lot longer. A whole lot
longer.
Yeah.
So like we have boar bees at our house that like drill into the wood. Like do those produce honey?
Not that I'm aware of, they don't. Yeah, they make a lot of holes. They may do some pollen. A lot of those other bees that do pollination will pollinate some, but I don't know anything else that would make it honey. I guess they got to do something to have food, but I don't think they make any eggs.
Babe, you have a visitor.
Yeah, it's a bee right there.
It's trying to get the stuff. Yeah.
They will come. I had a box like this sitting out on a patio, and I've got these swarm traps everywhere. And bees just decided to move into a box out of 12 or 15, whatever we had on there. Just moved into a box. So they
Like
smell that.
literally, there were thousands of bees on our patio.
She like to freaked out. When I opened the lid, nobody realizes how many bees are inside there until you open a lid. When I opened the lid, she kind of freaked out a little bit.
Well, I told the boys to get back because they were all up in it, you know. So I told them to get back so they didn't get stung because he was out there just like that. I think he was even in his bare feet handling them. And I was like, no, y'all get back. Just look at a distance. Let him handle it.
He was nervous. Anybody else? If not, I appreciate your attention.